Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new episode of The X Button, Season 3, Episode 40. I am your host, Alejandro, and with me, I am very proud of saying I have a very special guest with me, the IGN superstar reviewer, I like calling him, Travis Northup, AKA TieGuyTravis. How you doing, Travis?
Hello, everyone. McClunky. Happy to be on the X button. If you were a PlayStation podcast, would you have to call yourself the Cross button?
Yes, ironically.
Yeah.
And what's funny with our logo is that like we have the three controllers. So it's like, and they all have like the X button like highlighted around, because that's kind of like, we talk about all three systems like equally as much as we can, even though me and my podcast co-host Paul, who's not here with us today, like we mainly play on PlayStation, but we're not like the PlayStation fanboys. It's like, I talk shit about Sony like you have no idea. Like I like slamming them, like especially with all the stupid shit that they've been doing. But I'm so proud, so happy to have you here, Travis. So kind of like for context, people, like I was able to like meet officially Travis when we both reviewed Payday 3, which was not gonna be a review I was gonna do. Ains was gonna do it, but he was like in the middle of Cyberpunk. And then he was like, we got given a code, and just to kind of like inside baseball me that I did write for Season Gaming. All my reviews that I've done this year, I have not gotten a code. They have asked for a code, we never got them, so I had to like do the reviews because I was gonna play them. And that was a code. I was like, I want to feel what it's like to play something in the pre-release environment, even though it was already early access because of the deluxe. And he was like, yeah, connect with Travis. And I was like, oh my god, I get to, because you, Travis, I feel like I've known of you since like 2019 when when I first saw you in the Destiny 2 Shadow Keep, Fire Team chat. That's when like Destiny Legary brought you in. So I kind of known of you, and especially nowadays where I feel like IGN like has a few recognizable personalities. I feel like at least in the review side, you're like one of the more notable ones, like names that I know. And then here and there, some like the Tristan Oglips from Australia, the Luke Rileys, and Simon Cardy. But I feel like you're like per capita, you're the one that reviews more games for the side nowadays, right?
Yep, I was the highest volume reviewer last year, and I think I'm on track to be the highest volume review this year as well. Although I'm not going to beat my record anytime soon. Last year was the perfect storm because I was reviewing a bunch of smaller games, and this year I spent an entire month reviewing Diablo 4 and the better part of a month reviewing Remnant 2, and I'm fewer games but bigger ones, which is fine by me, man. I'm chilling. I'm happy.
And a better quality, because for people like if you go to like IGN and you put your name and you can see like the list of reviews, and you go all the way back, IGN love throwing you the bad games like constantly. It's hilarious. Like absolutely.
It was more that I think they were still auditioning me, and I was getting smaller projects and smaller games. And I think when you're getting the games because the way it works at IGN is if you're a staff writer, you're always going to get priority for the review because they don't have to pay extra money, right? They don't have to pay a freelancer to go and write it because you're already getting a salary. And so any big game like Starfield or something like that is going to get taken off the table right away because nobody wants to review it. And so I was reviewing all the stuff that was left over, the stuff that they weren't sure, if there was going to be a lot of interest in the game, but they were like, hey, let's take a flyer. Let's see if this game is good. Give it to somebody to review. And so I ended up reviewing a lot of really bad games the first, especially 2 years that I wrote for IGN. And then they started trusting me with bigger and bigger projects. Now I get to review big games basically in situations where like nobody else has time, right? Like if everybody else is going to like Gamescom for a week and there's a game that is coming out and they're like, hey, we need somebody to review it. Or like Shadow Drop, or like Hogwarts Legacy. They knew that we were going to get that code like 4 days before embargo, before the game came out, and they were like, Travis, do you have plans this weekend? And I was like, no. And they were like, do you want to spend it playing Harry Potter and then getting a review done in 4 days? And I was like, yeah, that sounds hella fun. Yeah. So,
and by the way, do you have the thick skin?
Exactly. Thick skin for what, do you have the thick skin for everybody to hate you for doing this? And I was like, yeah, no problem. I don't care. Yeah, that's another quality that I'm lucky to have as a reviewer, which is I have not and will not ever care what people think about me. So that's a helpful quality, having thick skin.
It's hard. It can be really hard, like not trying to take it personally when people like attack your character or your opinion. And that's something that I've slowly learning, which thankfully this year has been like my first full-time job of like reviewing many games. I haven't had that happen yet. Also, kind of like the people that go to season gaming, it feels a little more chill. With the exception of what's been happening with Ains with Forza currently, but I feel he poked the beehive with that one with some comparisons. But I think I've also seen that kind of that betrayal is always scary. But in you, I see someone that is just like super thick-skinned, IDGAF mode, and like it's always so funny.
I did stand-up comedy for years, and if there's ever a way to gain thick skin, it's deal with hecklers and drunk people and people booing you. And I just, it used to bother me maybe when I was younger, like over a decade ago, but I haven't cared in a long time. And so, people comment on my reviews and I'm just like, all right, I don't care. Doesn't bother me at all. Not losing any sleep over it, man.
It's awesome.
I'm already working on the next game, so I don't care.
Yeah, because it's just nonstop for you. It's really crazy. But
it is.
I definitely want to. Yeah, we want to talk more about like some of those things. And just a reminder for people that this is the X Bottom Podcast, our gaming podcast that posts every Fridays from 2 p.m. onwards, God willing. Available in the YouTube channel Escape Gaming, as well as most audio services around the world, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the like. You can find links in the RSS feed at tinyurl.com/escapegaming. If you enjoy our show, give us a like and subscribe. So, usually this is when we talk about what the games that we've been playing, Travis. Today, very fortuitous timing, because like the review embargo for Lords of the Fallen lifted, and surprise, you also reviewed that one. So, tell me, like, kind of like top level, what do you think of Lords of the Fallen?
Yeah, Lords of the Fallen, if you like Souls-likes, you're probably going to like this one, and if you don't, it's probably not going to change your mind. It follows the Dark Souls script pretty closely in terms of that formula of difficult areas and enemies respawning when you rest at a checkpoint, and players invading your game and trying to kill you and all that stuff.
Interconnected world with
interconnected
shortcuts.
world. Yeah, it's also got that thing where there's a castle right in the middle of the map and every area of the world connects back to it in some way. So it's kind of got that thing going for it, which is cool. But it also adds some pretty cool new stuff. The main thing, which is that you have a magic lantern that allows you to traverse a realm that lies on top of the normal reality called Axiom. And then the other realm is called Umbral, and it's kind of like a dark underworld version of Axiom. And so you can use your lamp to expose things that are hidden in that other world, or you can physically travel there. If you get killed, you automatically get pulled into that world, and then you have to find a way out by finding a totem that like will pull you back into the real world. And it's got really cool mechanics that involve going back and forth between the real world and Umbral, and fighting special enemies that you can only see there, and solving puzzles using that world. And it's really cool. And really, the only issues with it are it's got pretty weak boss fights in terms of the boss fights are fun, but they're just super easy. Like, even if you're a mediocre Souls player, like, you probably aren't going to get stuck on any bosses. They're all pretty straightforward and simple. And then it also has a pretty bad performance pretty much across the board. Like, it hitches, it loses frames pretty regularly on PC and console. You get a couple crashes every now and again. Multiplayer sometimes chugs and has like weird netcode issues. And so just like overall Dark Souls-esque jank as well. Weirdly, it's got that in common with Dark Souls as well. So yeah, it's a really great game. I gave it an 8 out of 10, which at IGN means great. Most of the issue I had with it was really about performance, which I'm really hoping they'll have fixed in the next couple weeks. I don't anticipate it'll all be fixed by tomorrow, which I think is what they're claiming on Twitter right now. Like, hey guys, we found the problem. And I'm like, did you? Because they've been little, insider baseball, they've been patching the game multiple times per day for the entire review period. They've been having like multiple gigs of stuff updated, and some of it's been pretty interesting changes. Like, they added like different pieces of the UI and stuff like that. But I've been doing this long enough to where I can tell when a game is coming in so hot that no matter how many patches they put out, it's going to have some problems at launch. And this is definitely one of those that's going to likely have problems.
Like I remember on another of those games this year that felt really hot was Jedi Survivor. Like at launch, is it very similar to it? Because that was also a game that had in the performance mode really bad performance issues. Not so much in the normal.
So I had I didn't have that bad of problems with Jedi Survivor. I know some people did, but I would say that this is a fair bit worse
Mhm.
from my experience. Like it's like there's like a couple areas of the game where there's a lot of stuff loading. I think it's a memory leak issue because it seems
Mhm.
like the longer you play without stopping the game, the worse the frame rate gets.
The
But there's
Starfield
some
problem.
area, yeah, but there's some areas where no, I mean the longer you play in a single sitting, like a
Oh.
memory leak, like you have to kind of
Mhm.
reboot the game for it to like clear its cache or whatever.
Oh.
And the there's certain areas in the game where the frame rate is so consistently unstable, it like hurts your eyes to play through
Mm.
it, at least to me. And
Chuggies.
it's gotten a little better. I've been playing every day since they've been patching it every day, and it
Mhm.
gets a little better, but it's still, it just got
Mhm.
problems. My guess is that it's just really difficult to load two worlds on top of each other because they're
Mhm.
keeping track of like all of the assets around the environment have two versions of it, and some stuff is invisible in one world, and enemies are still walking around and doing stuff when they're on the other side of the realm, and
Mhm.
so they're keeping track of like lots of different stuff at the same time, and making sure it doesn't overlap unless it's meant to. And my guess is that that's just super demanding on the game and causes a
Mhm.
bunch of issues because the game just runs not great.
Yeah.
So
And I also wonder how much is the Unreal Engine 5 of it all. It's like it's still really relatively early, and it feels
yep.
like, for example, Remnant 2, which was another game you reviewed this year, and you gave it a 9 on that one. I think that one also ran on Unreal Engine 5, but very different, that it was not trying to do that double rendering, and it was also not trying to do like a bunch of the bells and whistles that that engine is supposed to give, like in comparison to another Unreal Engine 5 game this year, Immortals of Avium, that they just like cranked everything possible for that. They're like, oh yeah, this engine does this lining, this engine does this thing. Oh, let's put it all in, and that game looked very grimy, but at least it ran well. So I feel it's like we're in the teething stage of people really learning that engine, or some people like that started developing in Unreal 4, and then they were like, once Unreal 5 is supposedly you can just overimpose all your work immediately and work from there. And it makes me wonder that's kind of like what happened with Lords of the Fallen. But the fact that you
Yeah.
still gave it an 8, despite like its performance, it kind of says a lot. And you also had like I mean, this is a fun bit from the Bitcast from back in Jedi Survivor times when everyone was like crapping on the performance mode, but it was fine in quality mode. And you're like, oh yeah, those are the frame rate fascists. So it's like
Yep.
I do agree with that. Is like, yes, like performance should never be like the be all end all of like what makes a game good. A better performance can definitely like improve on that, but there's so many games that can transcend its performance
Yeah.
issues. And
Well, they're not even. It's the problem with the frame rate fascists is it's not even instability. I'll never kind of get mad at anybody for like not liking unstable frame rate and
mm,
bugs and stuff like that.
oh
Like
yeah.
some people get really annoyed by that stuff, and that's fine with me. My issue is people saying, hey, the game, like the developers saying, hey, this game runs at 30 FPS across all platforms and
Mm-hmm.
it's locked, and then gamers going, that's not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
because that really my problem with that is it's the gamers thinking that they know better about the vision for the game or something like that, and I'm just like, well, you don't. So why don't you just play the game and see if 30 frames works? But like
Mm-hmm.
demanding 60 frames or saying like I'm not going to play any game that doesn't run at 60 frames. I think you're kind of just screwing yourself. You're going to miss
Setting
out on a
yourself for
lot of good
failure.
games.
Yeah, setting
Yeah,
yourself for
you're
failure.
you're gonna miss out on lots of good games that don't run at 60 FPS. And I don't.
Mm-hmm.
That's just such a weird line in the sand to draw. So that's my problem with that one. But this one isn't that. This is one where you could run the game at 30 FPS
Mm-hmm.
locked on PC, but it still doesn't hit that all the time. Like
So it's
that's
still
a
like hit you.
problem.
Yeah.
That's an actual
Mm-hmm.
problem. And yeah, to your point, I did give it an 8 regardless. And the reason for that is just because the issues are bad, but they're not so bad that they ruin the game
Mm-hmm.
completely. Like there's some parts where it gets really aggressively annoying, but like this game probably would have been a 9 without the performance
Mm-hmm.
issues. Like it really is a standout game. And so the performance is going to hurt it. And then the other part of it is, there's some issues where you can see and you're like, it's going to take them a million years to fix this. There's some
Mm-hmm.
games like that where you're like, this is
Yeah.
going to take a really long time to get to
Mm-hmm.
a workable state. And then there's some where you're like, this will probably be fixed in a couple months. And I felt that way about Lords of the Fallen. Like most of it is like performance issues where you can tell something weird's going on. Maybe there's a memory leak issue, but like I have a feeling like in a month it's probably not going to be anywhere near as bad
Mm-hmm.
of a issue as it is now. And Jedi Survivor was kind of like that too. Like it had
Mm-hmm.
issues, but like They fixed them. It didn't take that long.
The
Game runs
performance
really
mode
well
is
now.
excellent now. Like if you
Yeah.
play it now, and it worked well in the 30 FPS mode. That's how the majority of how I played it, because the performance mode, in that game really was bad, because it definitely was hitting those 30 frame mark so often that I was like, I might as well just crank up the resolution if it's gonna be like that. And it worked really well, and I love that game. It's one of my favorites of this year.
Great game.
Yeah,
Great game.
Crying that it basically got the Horizon Zero Dawn / Forbidden West treatment, releasing so close to like the bangers that people forget it came out this year, and it's sad. Because it's
I won't forget. It's still on my my Game of the Year pool, so hopefully other people won't forget about that game.
Yeah, especially for the frame rate patches that waited for the performance mode, they got it now, so you can go
see.
Yes, you can go see what the fuss was about.
Go play the game now. You'll probably like it.
Yeah, and anything other than Lords of the Fallen that you've been playing, Travis?
Yeah, I've been playing some VR games. I just got my MetaQuest 3, so I've been messing around with that and playing some stuff in there. Cyberpunk, Phantom Liberty, I'm getting through.
Yeah. Are you in the expansion part of it now? Because
I'm not yet. So what's funny is I actually I beat the game like a couple months ago in anticipation of Phantom Liberty, and then when Phantom Liberty came out, I started a new character anyway. So I probably shouldn't have done that. I probably should have just waited. But yeah, I'm replaying through it and working my way there. But you know, I tend to jump from review to review and assignment to assignment, doing previews and stuff like that. And so I don't often have a ton of free time. Basically, I don't get to choose which games I play. That's where I'm at this point in my life. Somebody tells me, "Hey, Travis, play this game," and I go, "All right." And that's my relationship with games. But yeah, I do want to play that. And then there was a couple. Oh yeah, Assassin's Creed Mirage. Into that. Mirage. Yeah, I want to get into that game. I want to play that for sure. And then yeah, there's a couple on my list of like I want to get to that. Cocoon is one I really want to play.
Yeah, that one was like that's a surprise sleeper. It was like just suddenly came out of nowhere to like high reviews, and learning that it's from the inside and Limbo, or some of the people that worked on that. I was like, how did I know this? So it's kind of like in the docket.
It's not a surprise sleeper for me, because as soon as I saw that, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago in the Xbox showcase, I was like, yes, I want to play that. I love puzzle games. So Ibanta's telling me in the last word this week that it was a 4-hour game made me more excited to play it, because 4-hour game sounds great to me. No, that's like I
totally miss because I was listening to the last word today before, just for context, like you were doing that podcast before jumping to this one. Like I probably missed when he said that 4 hours. I'm totally gonna do that like this week.
4 hours, like that's I'm sold, dude. I'm gonna play that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
All for tighter games instead of like bloated stuff. So
yeah, it sounds like Mirage is that too, which is cool. So.
Yeah, Mirage, I beat it 2 days ago and also platinumed it like all together. So it took me like 25 hours. So
Not
it's
bad.
like, yeah, it's like for Assassin's Creed. Like, what is your history with Assassin's Creed? Like briefly, like have you played all of them?
All of them,
including Valhalla.
All of them, including Valhalla. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Where does your preference lie? Like, because that's always like a fun conversation to like frame like how Mirage is gonna play for some people.
Assassin's Creed 2 is my favorite.
High five.
Yeah. What up?
Yeah.
Just because Assassin's Creed 2, I feel like really. The thing I love about 1 is, even though the stuff you're doing in the Animus isn't that interesting, you're kind of just like going on a checklist killing spree. The story and the moments where you're playing as Desmond, for me, really tied it all together. I love the science fiction part of it. And I felt like 2 really expanded that lore and gave a reason for these weird artifacts existing, and you know, the secrets you could discover if you got all of the pieces and saw the final cutscene at the end. I thought was so cool.
Ezio's journey from birth to him becoming a master assassin is so cool.
Yeah, and that's if you count Brotherhood and Exodus and
Revelations.
Revelations, thank you. Is there one called Exodus? Did I just make that game up?
No, there is none that I know.
I think I did just make one up.
I bet you it's gonna be a name sometime, because they're gonna
for sure. For sure, that's gonna be a name for sure. That probably my favorite one. I also really like Black Flag. I know that one's kind of a corny game, but it's fun. To me, the problem, I hated 3 just because I thought 3's in the Animus stuff was a problem, and then games after 3 have been really hard for me to get into because I feel like
Nothing ties them together. Nothing like really ties the thing.
the outside of the anime stories have been super weak,
Mhm.
and that really is what ties it together for me and makes me want to keep playing. But that said, I have been playing them all, so
Yeah, they're like they're really they're like my open world comfort food out of like many open worlds, especially from Ubisoft. That's always one, and also remembering how when I was really in it with like the outside anime stuff, that was like what made those beyond just like cool historical recreations, but like me that I love sci-fi. Obviously, you do too with the McClunky and all that. Like there's just something about their weird mix of sci-fi and history and how it all makes sense. That's what always like made me love Assassin's Creed, and. And I would say the thing that I really loved the most about Valhalla 3 years ago is that it felt like Ubisoft finally trying to do like an honest to goodness real attempt to tie that again in a way that also made sense for the entire series. How it reframed even weak games like 3 in a different light, thanks to like how it plays with perspective and how like it tried to make sense with like the mythology and that, or kind of like when it plays with the weird Norse mythology shit and all that, and you realize that it was an analog to the Isu and all that. If you really paid attention, that you can even get a Ezio cameo, like they even tied it in like in those Norse mythology parts to like that amazing scene at the end of 2 when he meets Minerva and then he speaks with Desmond. Like, it's in that game, so it was like it felt like for everyone that loved the outside lore of that game, Valhalla was like really special. It was just too long. Like Valhalla it was just like undone by how really long it is.
You can't really enjoy the story if it takes so damn long to unlock the whole thing. So
yeah, so
that's a bummer.
And that was the thing that I think Mirage wisely feels like an improvement. Like a reminder that the 15 to 20 hour Assassin's Creed experience that's digestible and you can feel like you can do everything at once. Like they really nailed that, and them saying that they wanted to go back to the back to basics, to stealth and all that, emphasizing stealth more than combat and all that. I feel like they really did it well, and it was also a nice reminder that of how good it is to one hit kill people with the hidden blade. Like with that, and in Valhalla you could do that if you got the upgrade or if you went to the accessibility option to like enable that. Even though the game was like, hey, we didn't design this game like this, but here's the option if you want it. But it's like it was them trying to like pussyfoot around giving the identity of the game back, and I feel like Mirage really embraced that, and I was glad for that, because there's always been the discussions like, obviously Assassin's Creed changed for a reason when we moved from Syndicate to Origins, and look at the success of Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla as they've kept been getting better at like have sold more and more. So it was like usually the people spoken, but then there was many of us being like, yeah, it's like the new one's cool. Like I've learned to love the RPG ones, but I don't love them like I did the other ones. And also because Ubisoft making all the open world so ubiquitous that it felt like what I was playing with the RPG Assassin's Creed I was seeing in Far Cry, I was seeing in Watch Dogs and all that. I was like, yeah, it's like this all feels samey, so it feels like Assassin's Creed doesn't feel like it has that unique identity like it used to, and I feel Mirage like brings that back. Where Mirage stumbles mightily is in story. Is like Mirage was, all those reports where we heard that Mirage was supposed to be the final piece of DLC for Valhalla before they kind of blew it up as a full game. You feel that heavily in the story. It's like it's anemic. Very, very rarely you see like any memorable character outside of the main character Vasim and her mentor Roshan, which is voiced by the amazing voice from the Korean matriarch from Mass Effect 2.
Nice.
And Lakshmi from Destiny 2. Like I forget her name. She's Shona Agadwulu. I don't. It's iconic voice. You recognize it. But it's like I forget her name, but they're like the only two characters the French lady, yeah. And they're like the only two characters that really like register. And that story is basically like fleshing out Basim, which is like a big character from Valhalla, like also gonna be like a big figure for that franchise going forward, kind of like in the future. Spoilers. So if you didn't finish Valhalla, like there's some weird shenanigans that happen at the end of that game, but that's kind of like all it does. So it's kind of like as a story, it feels very inessential. Where I recently I updated my rankings over at Season Gaming for like all the Assassin's Creed games, and kind of where I ranked it was like, because I really enjoyed them going back to basics, because it showed me that there's still juice on Assassin's Creed still doing that. Definitely they have to get more ambitious going from here, but it proved that, yeah, there's life for this outside of outside the RPG stuff. It's just they gotta make a better story. So I put it like ahead of Valhalla for me, but behind Origins and Odyssey. I still feel like those 4 games are kind of like middle of the list. And my first 3 are like Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and Syndicate. Those are like my favorites. And the 4th one, it's Black Flag.
Which one's Syndicate?
The London one with Jacob and Evie Fry, the one that people didn't buy because it came after Unity. The one with the grappling hook, the main character has like the hat. The 2015 one.
Is that the one where you have a sister?
Yeah,
you're twins.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Jacob
I
and
hate that one.
Yeah, you really hated. You hated Syndicate.
Yeah,
oh man, I love that one. So
no.
yeah, that one's either.
Me.
Yeah,
that was also the one where I felt like you had to pay for the extra stuff. That one kind of burned me on the microtransaction thing, because that was the one where like they introduced the idea of you paying to get double XP or double money or something like that.
I didn't buy that, but it was like the first one. It was it's still available. Like if you go to a microtransaction shop, it's there. But I feel Odyssey is the one where you felt more the throttling of the XP to push you into that one, because
that one really feels like they stretched it out so that they would force people to buy to make the game like feel like it had good pacing, which is so annoying. Yeah,
and it's unfair because Odyssey is like really fun. Like ignoring that, I feel like it's that Odyssey is like the most fun to just kind of run around, because I played as Cassandra in that one, and I always thought of her as Wonder Woman. So I'm like, that's the kind of game that I had to like ignore that it's an Assassin's Creed game and think of it as the I'm playing the Wonder Woman game that we haven't gotten and we probably never will. Even though
we might.
Yeah, the Shadow of Mordor people. Yeah, the Shadow of Mordor people are supposedly working on that, but we haven't heard anything since this 2 years. So I'm like, at least I got my fill with that one. So yeah, it would be interesting. I know, like, with all the time you're so busy and all that, give Syndicate another. I had many people that felt that way about Syndicate, and then when they went back to it, they're like, huh, interesting, Jay. To each their own. So, yeah.
No second chance for Syndicate. Sorry, I'm not gonna.
But you don't like Unity, right? Or do you like Unity?
I don't like Unity.
Yeah, no. Unity was my bottom.
Honestly,
so.
I think the problem is with Syndicate is I just didn't care about like the setting or the main characters. I kind of gravitate away from just like, I don't know. There's
the cities.
Kind of felt like it. No, it's not that. It's like it kind of just felt like I was playing like a what's
Sherlock Holmes.
What's that TV show that Ains likes that I
Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders. That's what it felt like. He loves that show, and I'm like, dude, that is the most boring show I've ever watched in my life. I can't handle it. So
I enjoyed it fine, but it's so funny. He loves it, especially with his English ancestry. Yeah,
I think he's so stuck in the English ancestry, he can't see that show for what it is, because it's just like, dude, that show is 80% people walking in slow motion down the streets and in factories while music plays that is inappropriate for that era.
And that's Syndicate. And that's Syndicate. So I understand.
Like,
I understand for you.
Yeah, I just can't deal with it. I don't know, man. It didn't click with me.
Yeah,
I will say this. What I like from that game is I like that your headquarters moves with you on the train.
Yeah, the train.
That's a really smart mechanic.
Yeah, the grappling hook was also really fun later in that game, and there's also a really cool World War I or World War II kind of like side stuff that sends you into the future for like the kind of like
That's right. I remember that. Yeah,
like the descendant from the twins, and that was like a really fun surprise. So, but yeah, so Syndicate is always one that either some people are like it got overlooked as one of the better ones, or people are like nah. So it's so funny. We represent both sides in that discussion. But I can't wait for you to try Mirage and see like what you feel like. Obviously, temper expectations for story. That's like the one thing that it was funny, because I think we kind of had that sort of conversation about like I mentioned it. I even put the question over at Bitcast if it's like fair to like judge a game over doing what it had promised to do. And you made a really good point that it is fair to like criticize something, especially if it's not evolving and all that. It's just like I had seen some reviews that were just like criticizing for doing that instead of being like it doing that and not doing it as well. I do agree that it's not about just saying you're doing what you're doing, but if you're executing well. In my opinion, they executed on the promise, but definitely like not as ambitious as it could have been. But it's like what the fans wanted, and the fans responded in droves. They announced that it's Ubisoft's best-selling game of this generation already, and I'm like, yes, we showed up. The old school people showed up. So
yeah, I mean, people love Assassin's Creed games, so maybe just mostly the name, because even
Mm.
Valhalla, like
It's the best selling one.
that's
Yeah.
probably their second best selling game. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, especially it being the only one for like 3 years because we used to get these so often. But yeah, I recommend Mirage. I saw IGN gave it an A. Like whoever reviewed, I don't remember who it was. He started also doing the DLC for Valhalla. There, he also reviewed that one. He gave it an A. And I feel like his review sounds right, kind of like what it is. It's pretty great for what it does. It definitely can be better. That's why I ranked it as my number 6 in my list of 13 games. Or I mean, number 7 actually. Have you tried the beta for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Travis? Or
have not.
okay, man. Yeah, we received code over at Season Gaming, and I kind of like jumped on that one. I'm gonna be reviewing that one for them. By the time the campaign and all that, I've been like playing it. I got to like level 15, and it's interesting because I don't think I've ever seen a Call of Duty game being sold primarily as kind of like a repudiation of last year's game. Kind of like that's like the big selling point. Hey, you hated the slow movement from the last one. You hated like the unlock, how the unlock system is tied to like leveling up weapons or extracting from DMC. You hated the perks not activating on the start. You have to wait in the map for those perks to start. Like, fuck that shit. Like that, all of that is out. We walked it back. It's like we brought everything you enjoyed from Modern Warfare 2019, and guess what? We're bringing those old maps from the 2009 hit to Modern Warfare 2. And eventually we're gonna do a zombies mode that's gonna be like open world, and then the campaign is supposed to have open like sandboxy stuff. I want to see how that goes, but at least just for like multiplayer, is like I feel Modern Warfare 3 feels soulless, like because that's all it was. And we had heard that this was supposed to be DLC for Modern Warfare 2. That was kind of like the plan because they wanted to move away from annualization, because Vanguard the year before Modern Warfare 2 was like it was on fire. It kind of like came together at the last minute. It was like one of the buggier games, but then suddenly they did another game, and you can definitely tell this is DLC. Like they used in console. The beta was available on PS5. Is the exact same application. Like the Modern Warfare 2 application doesn't exist anymore. It just says Call of Duty, and it houses both games there. It's like that tells you a lot, like what the original plan of this was. And even when you go pre-order this thing, like if you see it in the list, it's under the Modern Warfare 2. So it's like they're trying to like paint this like overpriced DLC as like it's as its full game, and it really is only that. And I'm gonna be honest, like yes, some of those old maps are like it's cool to see them, especially if you play Modern Warfare 2. Do you play Modern Warfare 2 into the 2009 one? Of course. Yeah. So it's like for some of those maps, it's cool seeing them back. The Estate, the Favela, Skid Row, High Rise at the top of the buildings, and some of those maps, they're in the beta and they're here, and it's cool to see them. This is also an example where you really see that some maps were designed with the mechanics of the time, or kind of like with the design of the time. I feel like the mechanics of the new Modern Warfare that is like faster, that's all about like sliding, canceling, like perking in the corners by clicking the right stick, and things like that is like they don't really work in these maps, because these maps were also back in the day, I remember this as clear as day, these maps were hated for camping. They were so easy for camping, and guess what, people? Now with weapon perching and all that, there's even more camping. They try to like widen up the play spaces, and it makes like running through those maps, I feel like, man, this is not as tight as these used to be. And the visual style, because it goes more for more photorealism, like readability of map is horrendous. Like it is a friendly fire nightmare. Like it's so hard to like really see like who you're aiming, if it's actually a friend or a foe, because like it's not as differentiated anymore. And I'm like, yeah, it's like I'm not really feeling this. This is feeling rough. And I'm one that I wasn't in love with last year's Modern Warfare 2. I didn't like the campaign like much. The multiplayer I did enjoy, the kind of like the more slower stuff, because bunny hopping got like, screw Fortnite introducing bunny hopping into like competitive play, because I felt a lot of Fortnite players played Warzone and then went to Call of Duty and everyone was like jumping and jumping around and shooting, and I'm like, I don't feel this feels good. And I think they made the multiplayer of Modern Warfare 2 to counteract that, but then the hardcore community was like, you screw it up. This is they pulled Destiny 1 to Destiny 2. They changed things at the vanilla launch just because they wanted to change it, not because it was going to be good. And then the hardcore community revolted. It wasn't as popular like the original one. So I feel it's kind of like that. But I'm really hoping... I saw that they added a new mode that is very reminiscent to Trials of Osiris from Destiny, but it's 3v3v3. still like teams of 3 trying to like work together, kill something. It's like an elimination, but with 9 people instead of like 6. That's like the only thing that's like new. But I want to see if there's something more, because this really feels like they overpriced DLC. But it's Call of Duty, so I'm like, if you're gonna enjoy this, depending on how much you enjoyed last year, if you were one of those that didn't like last year, maybe the mechanical changes for this one will do it for you. So, are you interested in trying it?
Yeah, I'll try it. Might as well. I usually don't get enough time to really get through Call of Duty, but I try to do the campaign at least a little bit, because the multiplayer's never really spoken to me. More of a Halo guy myself. But I try to make a point to get through every Call of Duty campaign. I usually don't get to it though until like 9 months after it's been out. Like I get to the Call of Duty campaigns really late, but I do try to complete them. I've completed most of them, but I haven't really been like deep into Call of Duty multiplayer since.
To me, it was 2009. That was the last time. No, like Modern Warfare 2.
Mine was more recent than that. I think it was like one of the Xbox One years. Oh, it might have been what was the one where Kevin Spacey was in it?
Advanced Warfare. Yeah, the 2014
Warfare.
one.
I think that one might have been the last one I played. I'll put a lot of time. Actually, you know what? No, I played whatever one there was an extraction mode with aliens.
Oh yeah, Ghosts, the launch one for the Xbox One and PS4.
That one was really bad. That must have been before Future War or Advanced Warfare, huh?
Yeah, so yeah, it was Ghosts and then Advanced Warfare the year after.
Oh wait, no, but I also played the one with Jon Snow.
Oh yeah, 2016 Infinite Warfare.
You know what? Maybe I have played more Call of Duty multiplayer games than I remember.
There's so many. Yeah, there's so many of them. I don't blame you.
It's been around for so long, but they're never my bread and butter. I usually get through the campaign and then I play a little bit of multiplayer and then I never play it again. Usually is my.
And I would make the argument the Infinite Warfare campaign is probably the best one from that generation.
Damn good. I love that one.
Yeah, it was Rogue One. Like if you see Rogue One, it was basically that.
It also is one of the best soundtracks of Call of Duty. I actually bought that OST. It's quite good.
Yeah. And I feel like it was unfortunate that it had to be the third futuristic one in the string, so it had to like suffer people being like, we don't want this future stuff, but it was a really good one, and that's the one that at least for campaign I'm doing a write-up right now for Season Game where I'm ranking all the campaigns. I did a playthrough of all of them, like a replay from like Call of Duty 2 in 2005 all the way to like the Modern Warfare 2 2022 last year when there was barely anything to play, and they're so easy to kind of get through. And that's one that's like high up there for me. To me, the gold standard is still like the 2007 and 2009 Modern Warfare 2 campaigns. Those are still classics. And Black Ops 1 it's also another classic one. But there's some really good campaigns in there. I'm hoping this year's is good, especially because they're gonna do that sandbox style. That there's gonna be some missions that you can do completely stealth or like go all out. And I'm like, yeah, that's what you call that? It's good that they're trying to innovate, because Modern Warfare last year's one. The most it innovated was adding Last of Us style stealth missions where you do like crafting and all that, and it didn't work.
Right.
Yeah. It was like
sounds like what you want out of a Call of Duty game.
Exactly. So it was like that was like an addition just for addition's sake. I'm like, yeah, if you're gonna add, try to like think more outside the box. So I'm really hoping for that one. So yeah, that's all that I've been playing, Travis. So now we would go for the news, but there's barely any news to talk about other than the PS5 Slim. Do you see that monstrosity? that it has like the split in the middle. So hey, as long as it's like slimmer, I need to see like those unboxings, people putting both of them side to side and see if it's actually. I know that IGN posted like the measurements, but I'm like, yes, but I want to see them. I want to see them like literally next to like when Digital Foundry or anyone else like put them next to each other. I want to see if it's like a slimmer thing. And then for other stories, not much of note. So it's now time for you, Travis. So it's like you're like a special guest here. I wanted to get you in because I would really love to talk about kind of like what it's like to be like a critic, a games media critic right now, and kind of like your story and what you think of how reviews are, the landscape of reviews kind of is. So just kind of to start as saying like, how long ago did you start as a game reviewer? Not just IGN, like just in general.
I think my first game review was in 2012. So it was over a decade ago, and actually I might even been even further than that. It might have been 2011 or something like that. I can't remember what my first game review was, but it was definitely during the Xbox 360 generation. I think I might have still been in college, and I had a feeling I wasn't going to be able to review games for a living, just because I needed to pay the bills, and game reviews aren't known for being super beneficial to your wallet. But I always wanted to do it, so I found any site that would let me write for them, and I started writing, and I found out pretty quickly that I was pretty good at having opinions, really strong opinions and everything, because I have the exact personality of Larry David. And yeah, and so I started doing that, but I did like news beats for a while. I just like wrote news articles and stuff like that. I did previews and events and some other stuff and podcasting, and just sort of cut my teeth that way, unpaid for, I think first time I got paid was 9 years after I started writing. It was like a long time, maybe 8 years after I started writing. But I worked for a really long time as it just being a pure hobby that I figured I would never get paid for. And then during that time, in the middle of me writing reviews for indie outlets for free, I got hired by IGN's parent company to work an office job.
Ziff Davis, right?
Working in acquisitions and on the business side of things. And that is where I met everyone at IGN, and I worked in the same office as them from the years of 2013 to 2019, right before the pandemic happened. So I was in their office and making friends with them and rubbing elbows, and then all that time never wrote for them until I stopped.
Tail end.
Basically until I left is when I started writing.
Yeah, so like for context of when you had joined around that time, that was around the launch of the new consoles, so PS4, Xbox One, and former mainstays like Greg Miller, Colin Moriarty were still there. That was like still 2 years before they split and went to do kind of fun and all of that.
Actually I worked right next to Colin Moriarty.
Yeah, which is funny. Like, I think it was in when Ains did that trivia episode and had Colin in. And then you mentioned that, I was like, oh crap. I was like, crap. It was like, so you actually like did like sort of rub elbows like around that time.
Yeah, I rubbed elbows with him around that time. None of those people, I was not cool enough to talk to them, but they all lived in San Francisco at the time. Actually, Greg Miller still does. And Brian and Max live in Oakland, so they're not too far away. But I used to go to the same donut shop as Greg Miller every Saturday morning,
and he was always there.
He would walk across the street in his pajama pants to go to that donut shop, and we would chat in line and stuff like that. So I've always been like adjacent to IGN, and I always wanted to write for them. Even when I was in high school, I someday I was like, I want to become a writer. But never thought I'd actually be able to do it. But I did know those guys, and I saw Greg and Colin start their own thing. Saw IGN get acquired and change its model, and got to be involved in the Humble Bundle acquisition and stuff like that.
I forgot that they were one and the same now. So
that was part of the business team that was making those decisions.
The pivot to video also. You were there at IGN for the pivot to video.
I was, yeah, and that was a larger thing that Ziff Davis was doing too, because Ziff Davis was originally a print magazine company that was writing like a PC mag as a actual mag, and the
olden times.
Yeah, they had to go through bankruptcy and rebrand themselves as a digital company, and I was part of that too. So my story's kind of interesting, but I've always liked to be as involved in the games industry and writing about it as I possibly could have. And through persistence and just a lot of connections, eventually that came together for me, and I'm super grateful for it, because how some people have imposter syndrome.
I feel that heavily sometimes.
Well, you got to figure that some of the people with imposter syndrome have that because they're actually imposters. And I'm one of those people. I'm actually an imposter. So that's how I feel about it. But yeah, it's cool. I feel super honored that I get to write about games, and I absolutely love it.
No, and just thinking about for 6 years before your first official poster review in May of 2019, which was Decay of Logos. And and then me finally like noticing you with the Destiny 2 Shadowkeep review that you gave 7.9 at the time, and Destiny Gary, who he's still at IGN, right?
Yeah,
Because
he's a director now, so you see him less, but yeah, he's still at IGN.
He only has like his own YouTube channel sometimes and all that. That's where I see him more. Whenever he like sometimes get Paul Tassi for like a debate, your frenemy. Which by the way, people are like, if you want to see some really interesting debates, go to The Last Word. Try to put Paul Tassi whenever they got him. Like Travis and Paul always are like at the opposite ends all the time with like a debate.
Yep, we argue a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually also had a Twitter argument recently about the Starfield reviews.
Oh, yeah, because he's like, just for all respect, due respect to Paul, he thinks of reviews too hard on the American academic system. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like a lot of people erroneously like think that the way that academia assigns score should be like the standard.
Just to be clear, he doesn't think that that's good that people do it. He just accepts that is how it is, and so he gives scores because he's trying to live up to the expectation. And my philosophy, and I think IGN's philosophy, is that the scoring system of if it's not 8 or higher, it's crap, is stupid, and so we intentionally don't follow it. And I will fight that to my dying breath. I don't care if the public disagrees. I intend to change their mind.
And I push hard for the idea that an own outlet is its own personal thing, and they have their own scale, and they have to respect what they think is their own scale instead of like trying to conform everything into like a medium. So that's like a funny debate that I've seen that you have with them. But yeah, going back to it, so yeah, when Destin brought you in to Fireteam Chat, that's when I knew, especially because that was like the beginning of you becoming kind of like IGN's Destiny guy when it came to reviews, because Destin was the one doing, at least from Destiny, the beginning of Destiny 2 up until he reviewed the Joker's Wild season of the Drifter, because he didn't review unfortunately he didn't review Opulence, which would have been a good one to review. That's the one when he dropped from doing reviews. So then you became kind of like the Destiny guy, and then I followed you because I was an avid listener for Fireteam Chat. Like, in fact, like Fireteam Chat is the reason that I kept up with Destiny, because I dropped Destiny like a bad habit after I finished the campaign of Vanilla. And at the time, I didn't have friends to be able to do the raids and all that. So I was like, well, I kind of by myself here. I finished the campaign. This was very underwhelming. I mean, like, this leveling system was weird. Remember when it was like, get the blue armor, then level the blue armor to a certain point to hope to get that, like how it was like in the first year. So it was like weird. And then I saw that Fireteam Chat started. I was like, wait a second. So I was already a listener of podcasts on Log, GameScoop, and beyond. Those were like my things. And then Fireteam Chat started. I was like, wait a second, they're doing a podcast about a game that I didn't feel at the time had like legs, especially coming from Dark Below, that was like so anemic, especially if you didn't raid. There was like nothing in that expansion, so it was like it was like
four missions.
Yeah, it was like 4 missions that could be done in an hour. But then I started listening to it. Was him, Jose Otero, and Alfredo Diaz originally, and then hearing them talk about the experience, I'm like, you know what? It's like, I feel there's something here. They're willing to like do a weekly podcast that kept going and going and going and going, and that's what pursued me to do LFGs, do raids. And I credit that podcast for me still being in a perpetual relationship with Destiny now, just because there's just something fun of feeling like you're part of like a grander community that love that game. So
yeah, it was before games were long term, at least in the console space specifically. It was like, as some MMOs like WoW would live forever, and then every other game you would just complete it and then put it back on the shelf. And it was also a new thing for IGN to try, because they didn't really do podcasts about games. They did podcasts about consoles or things that were evergreen. And Dustin and Jose decided to try to do something totally new, and it definitely paid off. I mean, I think at the time of IGN or Fireteam Chat's last episode, it's 300th episode.
Yeah, 300. Actually, it ended right at there was a 300. Oh yeah, for like the Witch Queen. Yeah, it was like a Witch Queen special.
Yeah, we did one year later. I think it was like the highest listened to podcast. It was had more listeners than all the other IGN podcasts combined. And the other IGN podcasts, by the way, are huge. They have like Podcast Unlock is the world's
Number one
biggest,
Xbox.
number one Xbox podcast. I'm pretty sure Unlocked is like up there, if not the highest PlayStation podcast. So
yeah, Beyond.
Yeah, Beyond. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. There's like debates of like where does Beyond, PS I Love You were kind of funny, and Sacred Symbols kind of like stand in like which one's more popular. Obviously, Sacred Symbols is because it has the highest Patreon of like a gaming Patreon, so it's like at least it's popular on just on the subscription level alone. But it's like Beyond was like the golden years. Beyond I credit for my love for podcasts like back in like 2010. So nice. I just, and then eventually how all of those podcasts eventually helped branch out a lot of people and start doing their own podcasts. Like with you specifically, when Fireteam Chat ended, kind of like I caught some stray episodes when you showed up at the Iron Lords podcast a couple times. I caught the Mass Effect 1 versus Mass Effect 2 debate where you were in the right camp, I would say.
That's where I met Ains.
Yeah.
That's how I met Ains and Richard Hogue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it was like both of them were like against you in that one because they were in the Mass Effect 1 camp and you're in the right camp, as I like calling the Mass Effect 2 side. So it was like that one was a fun one, especially that was the first time I heard the hot takes from the lovely Richard Hogue, which if you go look at Bitcast people, it's like poor Travis here has to swallow so much like insanity sometimes, like someone saying that Resident Evil Village is worse than Resident Evil 6 or that Deathloop is worse than Resident Evil 6.
Those are dude. Yeah, unbelievable. An unhinged take if I ever heard one.
Yeah, but that's what makes so special, and the fact that you're the one that like attacks him, like that's what radicalized YouTuber. It's like
he is a radicalized YouTuber, man. Can't trust him.
Yeah, and then through that crossover, you did like an Iron Lords podcast, and then like the stray one that is still one of my all-time favorite ones, where they had Hip Hop Gamer, and Hip Hop Gamer and King went at it like the eternal PlayStation versus Xbox debate, and you were just there in the corner. So because they were like PlayStation has nothing.
I hate console stuff, man.
Yeah,
anytime I talk to somebody who's like a PlayStation or Xbox fan,
partisan.
I feel like I'm partisan. I feel like I'm talking to like an alien creature. I just do not understand it. I'm like, are you living in a different reality?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Why are you being weird? Why are you being weird?
Yeah, it's like it's so dumb. And I used to be that back in the PS3 one, but that was when I was a kid. So I'm like, when you grow up with that, is like, I'm really hoping some people see the light because it feels like console partisanship has gotten absolutely worse, especially with how Twitter/X currently is.
Just partisanship in general. Everybody wants to be on a team now, whether it's like politics or sports, their belief system, or there's just everybody wants to have a team in a camp, and it's very toxic. And that's kind of part of why I got into the industry, because I consider myself a moderate in all things, and I do not like hyperbole, and I do not like extremism, and so kind of my goal in the industry is to introduce a little bit of level-headedness, which I think we could use more of, and this is one of the areas. Like, you know those people who you ever watch one of those documentaries about a guy who like used to be in the Ku Klux Klan, or like used to be a Scientologist, and they talk about like how they reformed now and how they felt. I feel like there's a lot of those in the gaming sphere. Some of them who believe in conspiracy theories about certain outlets or media people and all this weird stuff, or the fanboys I would consider to be those are Scientologists by a different name. I mean, really, when it comes down to it. So, I'm just out here trying to reform some people, you know, maybe push back against a little bit of the chaos.
And specifically, that's one of the things that I love about Bitcast. You, Ains, Dan, and Hogue, like, at least push for that. For at least a semblance of like objective sanity when it comes to discussion, not like a machine or anything, but kind of like trying to see it for what it is. And that's just the healthiest way to see it. Like, I own all systems. Like, to me, it's like, I don't want to be like just in one side and having to attack the other one, especially like, obviously some people, if their means don't allow it to have two consoles, I understand, but that doesn't mean that then you have to justify like your one choice to behave like a baby. And it feels like that just makes gaming richer, being able to experience all, like, especially in a year like this, that I feel like all three consoles have had something that they offer and has just enriched in being able to experience all that. And
my North Star is, anytime I'm thinking about any issue in the game space, my question is always, how is this going to help me as a gamer slash consumer of video games? And if the thing that I'm doing isn't directly benefiting that, then I don't do it. Right. And so if you're advocating for one big corporation over another, I would argue that you're fighting somebody else's war for a weird reason. Maybe you've been tricked into arguing against your own interests for some reason. And you should probably reset to like, hey, I'm the consumer. I deserve to be treated fairly. And it's my kind of job to bargain for myself in this situation. And so, yeah, I mean, that's also the role of a critic, right? Is to help our peers, our fellow gamers, navigate the market and tell them which games are worth their time and money and which aren't. And so I just come at it from the aspect of, you know, if you had a friend who was asking you for a recommendation, what would you tell that friend? And how can you help somebody save their time or money, not buying a bad game, or buying one that is good with caveats and letting them know, hey, here's why I think it's good and why maybe you won't like it if your tastes aren't the same or whatever.
Or the idea that you love something so much and that's why you're extra hard on it. I.e. Destiny, which was gonna be like my next, like my next, like my kind of my next topic of conversation here. So, to me, Destiny is always like an interesting one to see, going all the way back to 2014, because I feel that was the first case of proving that the initial like review of a game is not the long-standing opinion, because that was also the beginning of what people hate the word now, the live service era, which you have also been kind of like, that has been your beat in coverage, like it feels like over the last few years, and how Destiny was one of the first cases of a game that launched in a mid state. I didn't give it like a 7.8 back then, but it was like 6 out of 10 felt like the more common review. By the way, where do you review the original Destiny on originally? I've been like trying to look, or is it like
remember.
To remember? So, because I would love to see like what you thought. Like,
I gave all I remember is my review was a 6 out of 10, and then I don't think I actually know it. Taken King, I think I gave an 8, but I think 8 is the highest I've gone with Destiny.
Yeah, Witch Queen was also an 8.
Yeah, Witch Queen was an 8 as well. So,
and
I've been reviewing it for a while, but it was one of the first early ones, and didn't launch super well, but got better over time, and it had the benefit of expansions and annualized releases. So I feel like Taken King was like a fresh start for that game. But yeah, that Destiny was like my main, that was what I was known for covering for a while, just because I was the only one who really understood it. And I reviewed plenty of other games in that time, but I just spent a lot of time in that world.
Do you ever do the original Division, by the way? Like
I played, and I don't think I reviewed it, but maybe I did actually. But I definitely played it. I put a lot of time into it. I played Division 2 as well, and I basically played all of those games that were supposed to kill Destiny and they didn't.
The anthems.
I think the fact that I had done that and understood the live service model really well ended up making me like the de facto like expert on it at whatever outlet I was writing for at the time.
Because not only did you write that, like I know you have gone to developers that have been trying to do live service, and you always you always push and always asking, do you have a live service team ready? Like the one that's already been like working on that content that's supposed to be launching almost immediately after like the base game. And we see so many of those games that don't have that, and then we see the live service just kaput. Poor Halo. Halo Infinite, like in recent time. And I feel like Destiny also like puts reviewers like in an interesting position, because I know IGN has done re-reviews of other games like that have that long tail / live service. Like I remember Rainbow Six Siege was one of those that had an initial review in 2015, and then they updated it like 3 or 4 years later. You did one of those for No Man's Sky, also an infamous launch in 2016 that then by 2019 I think you did the Beyond update. I think that was one of your also first reviews from what I saw from your back catalog.
Yeah, it was pretty early.
Yeah, that was like your I have the list here. That was your second review actually. After Decay of Logos. Yeah.
No way. They did Decay of Logos, and then they gave me a VR headset and said, damn.
Yeah, so
crazy. Dude, both of my first reviews were rough, because I don't remember those being my first. I must have been writing other stuff for them or something, because my first review, Decay of Logos, I got death threats for that we had to report it to the FBI.
Damn.
And then the second review, if it was No Man's Sky, maybe Disco Elysium was the one that got canceled in between that. It didn't get
Yeah,
published. Maybe
yeah.
that's why it doesn't feel like it was the first one.
Yeah, Disco
Um,
Elysium happened in between No Man's Sky and Shadowkeep, which Shadowkeep, the one where I
okay.
noticed you, was also,
Yeah.
and then you
And
finished
then
that year with Medieval.
No Man's Sky I remember because I played that on the original PSVR,
Mm-hmm.
which did not have a good frame rate for No Man's Sky, and I played that game for a week and I kept throwing up from headaches
Uh-huh.
because of the VR experience. And man, they really put me through the ringer at the beginning. Jeez.
Yeah,
Um,
your last review in 2019 was Medieval, their Medieval remake for PlayStation 4.
Medieval. That was a good game. What
Mm-hmm.
did I give it? 6?
6.5. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, you were like, you only did the 100-point scale for IGN only for 4 reviews, and
I
on
hated
2020,
it.
yeah.
I hated it. I hated the 100-point scale. When Dan told me we were changing, I was so happy
Yeah.
because my philosophy on scores is the
Mm-hmm.
difference has to mean something, and it has to
Mm-hmm.
mean something specific. It can't mean something amoebus. Like,
Yeah.
what is the difference between a 6.7 and a 6.8? I couldn't tell you, which
Yeah.
means it's not helpful.
And
You
it's
know
so
what I mean?
interesting because I started following IGN in like 2005. That's when I started, because I remember how IGN used to do cheats and games used to do
Yeah.
cheats. I would use IGN for cheats back then, but then I started seeing that it had more than cheats, and that's when I started like following. Oh, there's reviews. What's this? And reading that. And back then it had the 100-point scale with that box that reviewed like presentation, graphics, sound, gameplay, and lasting appeal. And then the score was like not an average, and I was like, okay, every of these things is scored, but not that. Like 100-point scale would make sense for, at least how I saw it. It's like it would make sense for me if like it was like an average of the different parts that they reviewed, but it didn't have that. And then this was before Dan.
I don't even think that makes sense, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because anyway.
Yeah, and then Dan, because that was even before Dan, because I think Dan joined in like 2012, and then in 2010.
He worked for 1UP, which was owned by IGN, but then they eventually combined all those proproperties into just IGN
and they absorbed Dan, they absorbed Jose Otero also, and Tina Tina Meany also, and there was also Tina Sanchez, who then went to work at some of the Call of Duty studios. So they had all that, and then in 2010 that was when they first revised their review scale, but they switched it to the 20-point scale, so the 8, 8.5, 9, 9.5. And kind of the idea was that they wanted to like gather all scores together and make like the review speak for itself, but apparently that was like not well received. And then in 2012, when Dan had already kind of became there, because I remember Dan posted a blog post kind of like asking, we're hearing people want the 100-point scale, but they hated the breakdown box, how will you like that? And apparently like unanimous, a lot of gamers said like bring back that, and that's when we got the 100-point scale back in 2012, but without the different the scores, but not the plus and minus system that eventually kind of got phased out halfway through because of too much water from back in 2014.
Stupid.
The stupidest thing that everyone was like,
I will fight for that statement. Until my dying breath.
Yeah, it's just so funny. There's like, I feel poor Callie Plaguey that she reviewed that Pokemon at 7.8, but everyone like was just about too much water.
Every once in a while, the meme of IGN review is unwarranted and too much water.
Yeah.
Get somebody who thinks that that's stupid, and I want to debate them because I don't think they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And then from 2012 to 2020, that's when we finally are where we are now. That is just a 10-point scale, which I learned also that was originally an IGN scale back in the day. So it was like,
it's OG.
So bring it back to the roots. And I feel like at least I feel like at least now with the scores that IGN gives now, is like it's clear that it's based on the word at the bottom. This game is good. Yeah, that's okay. This is great. That's amazing. Masterpiece. It's like, and no need to be like, yeah, this is slightly more amazing than the other amazing game, but what makes it more amazing than the other thing? I remember Greg Miller, back when he reviewed, he gave the original Uncharted like a 9.1, Infamous a 9.2, then Arkham Asylum a 9.3, and then he was like, no, Uncharted is better than all of this, and everyone was like, but you scored it higher, and then he was like, that's why I hate scores, and all that. But I get you get into that by those millisecond points or millipoints of doing that. You put yourself in that position, and now it's easier. It's like if you say a game is something, then you know what the score is, and you get into less headaches. So,
Yep. It's also just more helpful to players. Like I don't think you're ever going to get a reader to understand a 100-point scale and the nuance of every decimal system. It just doesn't make any sense. But like everybody knows what good means and everybody knows what great means, and the 7 and 8 scores being a helpful indicator of where it is on a scale of 1 to 10. How did you like that game on a scale of 1 to 10 is a useful question, but I've never heard a friend turn to another friend and go, how did you like that game on a scale of 1 to 100 using decimals? I've never heard that. That's unbelievable. Like I don't know why you'd ever. Yeah. So
or saying like
I'm just of the philosophy that like review scales, you can do all sorts of review scales and I won't have a problem with it as long as it's answering the central question of how useful is this to the reader. And if that's your framework, I'll never have a problem with your review system. But I think a lot of review systems don't really even try to do that. Right? Like, I don't want a 100-point system because it helps me feel better about, I can be more specific, but like, okay, how useful is that?
Yeah, it's like
ultimately you're answering the question, should they play the game or not? So if your scale was up, thumbs up or thumbs down, I think that's a perfectly fine system.
Yeah, and to me, like the only time that 100-point scale kind of made sense was the games that came at a 7.9. Kind of like us. It's really good, just barely missing grade. That's not the only time, but even then, it's like it's just a 7. So it's like
I hated that. If you're not great, you're good. That's my opinion on it. So I'm glad the 100-point scale is gone.
Yeah, I like it much more. It's so much easier to like keep track of, and especially emphasizing the meaning of that. It's like it's just so much easier. And even though I feel a lot of people that put too much stock in scores, it's like that's when it kind of gets like out of control. Like obviously this was on you, but Dan Stapleton recently had to like bear the wrath of so many people that when Starfield got a 7 and then trying to pull receipts on him being like, look, he dressed as Kratos from God of War. He's totally against Bethesda, even though he loved Fallout 4 and all that. So it's like everyone like putting too much emphasis on that, the fact that he's saying, no, this is a really good game. I may not like it like the other ones, but it's really good. But people didn't really care about that. Do you feel that? Because to me personally, that's not the site's fault. Like I feel it's more like audiences reacting too much or putting too much stock on the importance of scores, and how that can sometimes like shape or unshape the discourse. Because to me, like I don't know if you agree with this. Like to me, the score should be kind of like a snap guideline if a game is worth your time or not. And it's sometimes just too much to weaponize. Obviously, things like the console where we already talked, which is the stupidest thing, and that's why like that leads to people receiving death threats or things like that. And do you feel like sites have? Do you feel the future of sites will always have scores, or do you also see eventually, for example, IGN keeping the letters and removing scores? Like it's since that's kind of like what the idea is. Do you see kind of like, is that like the solution to finally stop making people try to gather everything like it's just like a score sheet like in the sports?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
So the reason IGN scores its reviews is not because of any reason that people usually point to, like, oh, they want to show up on Metacritic or whatever like that. I honestly don't think IGN cares about that stuff. The reason we score games is because we have data to prove that our readers find it useful. And that's really all it comes down to, right? If readers find the score useful, right? Like just imagine you're not somebody who even knows what Metacritic is. You're just a regular gamer and you go to IGN.com for news because and reviews because that's just the site and you read your reviews there, right? If you're that type of person and you go there, your question is this game being recommended to me? Did this person like it? And if so, how much did they like it or how much didn't they like it? And the score is one of the best ways to do that. The word and the explanation with the verdict and the thousands of words of description are also obviously extremely useful. And in my opinion, a reviewer's job is to justify their opinions with reasoning and give examples and explain why they came to the conclusion they do. As long as you're doing that, I don't have a problem with your review. But I don't think scores are going anywhere. I think there's a lot of data to prove that people do like it. The fact that it's weaponized by fanboys and used to drag games down or to make arguments that are not very not in good faith, I think that's a unfortunate side effect, but I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And I don't know that it should. I think people find the score useful for a reason. That said, I wish more people would read the entire review rather than just looking at the score and moving on. But I do think that there's a ton of data to prove that people find it useful. And at the end of the day, IGN's job is to be useful to its readers and help them make decisions. And if the score helps them, it's always going to be a part of our model. And I think it does. I think it does help them.
Yeah. And I feel also something that a lot of people really have to try to get in their minds is that really it's just even though professionally presented, a review is an opinion of someone's what someone thinks of a game that will not like invalidate how they may feel about a certain game. Like because I know, for example, like a game that you reviewed last year, Gotham Knights, that you gave it a 5 out of 10, which is mediocre. Yep. I played it and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was good. I was like, yeah, I enjoyed it more than he did, and I was fine with like saying, yeah, I did enjoy it. It's like I feel so many people feel like some outlets are kind of like the final say on like what a review says, and I feel that's like a very reductive way of thinking of games as an art form. Because how many times have you like played something that you may have scored at a certain point where your opinion has changed, like, or what you feel about it, like over time, and then you get that conversation and see it how that holds up, and not treating like just what a number said at a certain point in time as like the definitive say. This is something that I have a frequent guest in my show. He's called Sebastian. He does a podcast called The Single Player Experience. He really is all about the scores. He really is all about like defining that. And I'm like, sometimes scores, they're helpful and they're great snapshots of what a consensus may be, but I don't feel that should be the final say of like whether a game, like what a game is at a certain point. And I feel that's kind of like where reviews are being like mishandled by the readers, not the reviewers. I feel like reviewers do what they gotta do, and it's just like it just becomes like fodder for the stupid console wars, and then also kind of like undermines. I see games as an art, like regardless of what Roger Ebert try to like downplay all these years ago. Rest in peace, Roger Ebert. But I feel like art as an art form is something that like can stand the test of time, and it's always good to like, reviews are always good for like in the moment when this thing came to sale, like kind of like what you guys say, like especially with you, I think I kind of mentioned how you guys reacted to the Payday 3 review, and kind of like them wanting to, I'll mention is like they wanted to embargo people to that they see it like the day one, even though the game was already like available in 3 days. Like reviews are always good for that moment, especially like as a recommendation. But I feel like it should never be the long-lasting kind of like stamp of like what a game is, especially now. Like bringing it back to Destiny, is like Destiny's not a game that got scored back then in 2014. Like it's like some say it got better, some would say it got worse at times and all that, but it's like that's been kind of like the nature of some games, how they're not like what an initial review said they were. And I think that I find that fascinating, and how some sites have like really taken on like doing the. It's so funny because I think IGN, for example, I see they always every year they do their I don't know if you notice, they do reviews of the streaming services. Or like the review of the streaming services. Like I always see that, and I know it's like not feasible for like many games for that to happen. That like a live service be like, what this game is like in year X, or what this game is like in year X. And I remember you mentioning me that you look at metrics of like, is there interest on seeing the reviews, and I assume that's where the No Man's Sky review came from, the Overwatch review came from, and also Rainbow Six Siege came from, and then like Destiny, that you use it kind of like the expansions they use kind of like as a checkpoint of like where the game where the game kind of is. And it's always, to me, it's like
interest also spikes up during these times, which is again the point.
Yeah, so it's like I feel like there's something that I've noticed, that reviews, there's more nuance to reviews instead of just kind of like, this is what I gave, that's it, moving on. It used to be that back then. I feel that's kind of what games are, but I don't think games are that now. And I feel like there can be like more conversations about that. So, and bringing me back to Destiny, so you infamously, Travis, made a review for this year's expansion that at a time when everyone was not feeling positive about the game, your review in progress created like a weird backlash to the backlash, kind of like as Baltazzi put it, kind of like as a and like your review, when you initially in your review in progress said that Lifefall was pretty mediocre, and everyone was like, whoa, whoa. Yeah, it's not good, but it's not that bad. It was so funny seeing like that, how that happened. uh how do you feel like Destiny now, especially now with 9 years and all its topsy-turvy ups and downs as we're going through, it's like shaping up, especially now that the current season, is it basically done? Because like I thought it was done last week, and then this week had like another cutscene, something like that. I feel like yeah.
It's done. The season's done. They might have something at the end of the season, but yeah, if you got a cutscene this week, it might be that you were behind a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's over. I don't feel great about Destiny right now. I predicted during the Lightfall reveal like a while ago that this was going to be a tough year for Destiny, because Lightfall to me always seemed like it was haphazardly assembled and obviously wasn't supposed to happen the year that it happened, and had a tonal problem, I thought, since it's called Lightfall and light importantly does not fall in it. You know, I had a problem with that, but playing the game, I feel like I have a pretty good feel on how long Destiny's going to feel good. And even though Lightfall felt like okay at the beginning, I could tell it was light on content. The campaign was bad, and I felt like it was going to run dry really quickly. And I think people have since caught up with that review. I think sometimes it happens. I think it's happening to Starfield right now, where I've been seeing Reddit posts and stuff where people are like, honestly, I think IGN was kind of spot on with their review.
And to me with that one, I feel that's one of my bigger disappointments this year. Like now that I've like removed myself from it, and it's like, it's crazy. I was like, IGN may have any even soft on it. Like, and it's
I mean, some people on our team, like I think I said this when we were debating it on Bitcast, but like when Dan said he was giving it a 7, I think a lot of us on the team thought that he was going to be on the high end of the scores, and we were surprised when it was the opposite, honestly. We were surprised when it was like a lot of people giving it 10s. We were like, really? Like, all right, I mean, that's cool. But yeah, Dan ended up being on the lower side, although that has changed. The Metacritic went down pretty significantly.
It's like an 82 or 83 now.
82 or something like that, and there's definitely a lot of scores that are lower than 7. So
and then one very bad faith review by the Inquisition also that really tanked it and sent a lot of the people that care too much about the Metacritic into a state of diarrhea.
Look, if you what's the sad thing about that review is I read the verdict and I was like, I could see somebody thinking that game is a 4, and that verdict to me explains exactly why they thought it was a 4. So I didn't even really have a problem with the review based on the verdict. Then you read the body of the review and you see that that writer included stuff that had nothing to do with the game and clearly had kind of a vendetta out for the studio, and I can't tolerate that stuff. Like, to me, the important part of review is, you know, you're doing this for the player. I don't know if it helps the player to say, hey, I don't think you should play this game because they're bad to their employees. Like, you're certainly taking a stance, but I would argue it's not a pro consumer stance. It's really not. You're taking a stance for somebody else, and I don't think that has any place in reviews, frankly. And so it's unfortunate, because I feel like there's room on that Metacritic for a 4 out of 10 that is well reasoned. And honestly, that verdict read like, when I read that verdict, I felt like I knew what that review was going to say, because I was like, dude, I could totally see somebody thinking that. And it's just disappointing to see the conversation devolve like that. So
and now like with Destiny, like going back to that one, how I feel people's really caught up for that was like by the second season of this year. I feel people were like really up in arms with how unstable that game was getting. How even though they say that they were changing the seasonal content, it was still it still felt very similar in a way. There was like it felt like the game had a shadow under it that didn't really feel good, and it still feels like, even though I feel like this season currently it's definitely the better one from this year in particular, it still feels like the game, it's like, I'm kind of sad for the game, because it's like, we're in such a great year for games in general. Why was this the year that Destiny had to stumble? Why this one? And especially after last year with Witch Queen, that
it's like the perfect storm, because Destiny's in the worst position it's ever been. The games industry is in the best position it's been a long time, and maybe ever. And it's like, dude, Destiny's in, I don't know, if Final Shape doesn't pop off, I think it's in trouble. And I think even if it does pop off, it might just be the swan song. A lot of people are
And
looking
wanting.
to walking away. Yeah, you know, a lot of people are wanting to step off that game. So, and maybe it might be time. I've been playing that game for a long time, and
Yeah.
there's times I feel like every Destiny player has this, but there's days where I'm like, why do I play this game? I just want to stop. I want it to end.
Yeah.
You know, every once in a
Yeah.
while.
And then a raid experience can feel really gonna be like, sometimes this is kind of why I like playing this. Kind of like with the recent Crota's End, which I thought they did pretty good with repricing that. But yeah, even with the final shape reveal, it was so muted, and I'm like, I make this analogy to so many people that it's like, it feels like they're treating it like the Avengers Endgame, that it can be very vague because it's kind of like they're trying to keep the surprises and all that, but that's assuming their Infinity War was good when it wasn't. So it's like it's like the momentum going into what's ostensibly the end of that saga feels weird. But but then when I really think about it, it's been like really 9 years since we started playing this game, all the way back to vanilla in 2014 to now. It's like, for a live service, it's like the fact that it's gone for like 9 years. It's kind of crazy to really think that it's like,
Yeah,
it's definitely
I mean,
felt like,
there's no two ways about it. It's a
huh?
success. I think Bungie
Mhm.
would not be the same company it is today without Destiny, and it propelled that studio to acquisition,
Mhm.
and it continued accolades beyond Halo,
Mhm.
which I think is huge. The fact that they made Halo and then Destiny is crazy. Um, and yeah, it's great, but
They ushered live
to
service.
me it's one of the, yeah, they did.
Mhm.
And if you have ever played a live service game that you liked, I think you owe them a thanks.
Mhm.
But that said, it is also a game that has always had enormous potential and
Mhm.
almost never fulfilled that
Yeah.
potential.
Only a
And
few
that
times.
is that only a few times for the briefest moments. And I think it people will study Destiny
Mhm.
in the future. They
Yeah.
will study it as like a pivotal game, and
Yeah. Isn't you?
regardless of what you think of it, it is a pivotal game in the
Yeah,
industry.
isn't you just said that it's like equally top 10 greatest games of all time, and then one of the worst games ever, like almost at the
Yeah, I
same
said
time.
it's
Yeah.
Destiny. Destiny is one of my favorite and two of my least, or 10 of my least favorite games of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
almost
that's
in equal proportion. And
or yeah, it's
I
one of the best and 10 of the worst games I've ever played. That's what I say.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's it.
and it's and that's why it's proven really sticky. And I would say like, yes, like any live service, especially in this year where we saw so many of them just like be shut down. You actually made an article titled Apex Legends Mobile Avengers and Why Live Services Games Aren't Going Away, because that was around the time where everyone was like, is this it? Is this it for live services? Yeah, like, has the bubble finally popped? And to me personally, feels like a yes and no, because there's some live services that are still successful, even though maybe not as successful as one would think. Like Fortnite recently, that we were hearing that apparently wasn't making us the bazillions that it was making, but it was still making billions. But they were laying people off and all that, and that to me was
They're
like,
letting people off because they want to squeeze profit, not because their
yeah, not
game is
because,
failing.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
because it's like, and they're the ones that I want to hear less about. Like that's how we're gonna like finally achieve profitability or like stability. And I'm like, no, you're the game that literally everyone decided to pursue the live service bubble because they saw
Yeah,
the
well,
gold mine there.
they're also already profitable. They just want to be more profitable
Yeah,
by cutting people paychecks away. It's just a stupid strategy, in my
yeah.
opinion. But
So
I still feel like the answer is no
mhm,
on that one, and it's because I think people fall for a couple facetious arguments uh, when they talk about live service, because live service games have always had a high fail rate, but they've also had the pretty much the exact same fail rate as normal games, right? Think about how many normal games that aren't live services come out and flop,
mhm,
right? It's a lot of them.
yeah,
And live service games have had that forever, including The Division kind of flopped after its initial release. Anthem for sure flopped after its initial release. Like live
Avengers.
service games,
Mhm,
Avengers is a more recent case,
mhm,
but yeah, the games like that have always been flopping. And I think if you think that the live service bubble is bursting, you have to ignore a whole bunch of games that have come out recently that did well, you
mhm.
know? And I mean, Genshin Impact is a couple years old, but that one is crushing it. A more recent example would be like Naraka Blade Point. That game is still going strong
Yeah,
and
that's
is doing
A
really
Lord
well.
Cognito favorite over from like
Yeah,
the last one.
that one's really good. There's a whole bunch of, I mean, what Party Animals just launched, and it seems to be doing pretty damn
Mhm.
well
And
so
that's
far.
supposedly
So
a live service too, right? Like
it
it
is
just
a
kind
live
of
service. It
like,
has season passes and
mhm.
stuff. So Yeah, there's a lot of live service games that are succeeding, and I think when people point out that live service games are failing, they're assuming that the game wasn't successful, right? We
Mm-hmm.
know that Knockout City, a game that ended after I think 12 seasons,
Mm-hmm.
was profitable.
Yeah.
A lot, really
Mm-hmm.
profitable, because that team
They made
only
it
had 30
12
members.
seasons.
They made
12
12
seasons.
seasons, and their studio has 30 people in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, they crushed it. That game ended, and so people pointed as a failure. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if that's the case. It's just a live service game that ended, which I think we should probably start
Mm-hmm.
normalizing. Live
Like
service
it
games
used
can
to be.
end.
Like it used to be
Yeah,
back in the day that there's like a finite time for a game to
yeah,
exist and then it can just exist
yeah.
kind of as
And they're
in
they're
its own
and they're
state.
they're also not holding live service games to the same standard as traditional games, because I mean, do you think God of War 2018 is a
Mm-hmm.
failure because nobody's buying it today?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? People
Mm-hmm.
bought it back in the day, but like,
Yeah.
it's okay if games eventually stop selling. That doesn't mean that live service as a model is broken and that people
Mm-hmm.
should stop making live service games.
Yeah.
It just means that we're learning that eventually there is an endpoint even for live service
Mm-hmm.
games. We're not really sure where that should be,
Mm-hmm.
where that line should be, where you say, okay, the live service game is ending but it was successful, or
Mm-hmm.
when you're saying, oh, it's ending because it failed. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you can have, like, Fortnite is probably going to be here forever, but someday it's going to stop
Mm-hmm.
being a game eventually.
Yeah.
And when that happens, are people going to go, oh, the biggest failure of all, no, Fortnite? You
Mm-hmm.
can't say it's a failure. You just say, the fad ended, or that people got tired of playing, or they ran it as long as it could and then developers wanted to work on something else. Like, there's a million reasons to stop a game. I don't think that means it's a failure. And I think all you have to do is look at the dozens and dozens and dozens of new live service games that are being created every year, and know that the model is not going anywhere. And clearly developers and business people that look at
Mm-hmm.
profits disagree with the assertion that it is a
Yeah.
failure as a model. So
Yeah, and you have
I
also
still don't
pointed
buy
and you have pointed out also how live service can eventually make a game like fulfill its full potential that it wouldn't at like a launch. Like over at
Yep.
Bitcast, Dan, like one of the hosts, Dan, he loves Hitman 3. That is
And he
like
hates live service.
his live services, but that is one. Like how
Yeah,
it's
it's
been
like, all right,
how it's
well,
supported.
do you think do you think Hitman 3 would exist without live service? Because Hitman 1 was essentially a live service game that you bought piecemeal and had episodes, and they were able to not only have success, but IOI Interactive was able to buy Hitman from Square Enix as an IP
Yeah,
and own
under
it
buyout.
independently because of that, because of their success with that model. So it's funny to see people hate on the model and then like the games that come out of it, because I just think it's kind of silly.
Yeah, I feel like I think it comes down to kind of like perception. To me personally, I feel like a lot of people
Yeah,
think of live
totally.
service as just a looter. I feel like a looter has like ironically been like tied forever to like a live service when
and
it's
and battle royales. Yeah, there's like certain genres that people say, well, that counts as a live service and that doesn't, and that's really not how I think about it. And I don't think it's how the industry thinks about it. And yeah, there's just too many examples of
but
that industry, if anything, is growing, and more games are being successful in it than have ever existed before. Because people forget, for years the only one that succeeded was Destiny, the only one, and now there's like dozens that are crushing it and continue to be successful game. Remember Evolve?
Yeah,
Poor
Evolve
crash and burned. I mean, that was so.
Yeah, and it's funny, like the first time I ever heard the term live service wasn't even from Destiny. That was, remember, the Shiro World Shooter. That's kind of like how it was like being promoted. Live service, I think like the first time I heard that term was actually through Square Enix via Final Fantasy 15. When they started like them saying to investors like, no, we see like the product of Final Fantasy 15 as a long-term service for content and all that. It's like, oh, like something live, yeah, like even though it's a multiplayer, because they kept adding like expansions and all that. And it's so funny that was the first time I heard that, and then kind of like that term got co-opted. Then Ubisoft was like, we see our games as kind of like a long-term service. And I feel like that the terminology, I think it's hurting more than the reality of things. Like the beauty of where games are now is like, without like a live service idea, games would be stagnant and they wouldn't even feel like, for example, I wouldn't call like Cyberpunk a live service at all, but it's kind of that idea of like it was given a long tail to become its best self. And I feel like
to me live service is a layer on top of what a Cyberpunk's doing, where they're trying to engage with the community like at least on a weekly or monthly basis, and they're doing season passes and in-game events and stuff like that. And I don't think you can call Cyberpunk that, but I do think it's interesting that we live in a time where a game comes out and it's not finished, and
Mhm.
that's okay.
Yeah.
In some cases, it's not okay, like when a game is broken and
Yeah.
they never fix it.
We have normalized early access. That's kind of
Yeah,
like what's happened. What
that
happened.
part I don't love. And I'm a fan of live service, but I'm not a fan of every live service. I think a lot of them suck. A lot of them just push out a bad game and then figure, oh, it's live service, so we'll fix it later. That's not what live service means, dude. Live service means you make a good game and you continue to support it. And I think a lot of people forget that, and they treat live service like early access. And I think those are bad versions of a live service model, and I will always call them out. But look at Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is a great example. Launched as a great game. Its live service has been really strong so far. It's going to continue to be a great game. They're all in on making that ARPG exist, and we're going to get content for years that we wouldn't get. So if you're an RPG fan and you like Diablo 4, you're super happy with live services, or at least you should be, because you owe a lot to that as well.
Yeah, and on top of that, with Diablo 4, the best example of what you usually say, a team that thought ahead, that they knew that it was like, because it was going to be a live service.
They learned from the games of the past, which a lot of live service games somehow forget to do. They forget to. I think there's this weird culture where studios are afraid of investing in building a team that's big enough to support a game, because they're like, well, what if the initial game isn't received well? Then we have to worry about 3 teams worth of paychecks that all have to be fired. And it's like, that's the risk you got to take, man. You want to make a live service game, you better make those investments, because otherwise, even if your game's successful, if you don't have a live service game to live service teams to support it on day one, you're already putting your game at risk. And like, very few games manage to survive that year of pain that it takes to build a live service team. Halo Infinite barely survived. That year was rough, dude, where it had nothing. Like, it barely made it to the point where their live service team finally got their shit together. And even then, we lost 50% of the we lost the campaign team. They promised us campaign, and that's not happening. So I would say even that, I know Ains likes to say it's a successful live service game. I would say it's 50%.
It's a successful multiplayer, especially with the season 5 that come out. I'm like, giving them their flowers, they eventually got there, but it's like, to me, it's like,
but what, at what cost, dude? We lost the entire campaign they promised us. You know what I mean? Like, it's so funny. I'm never gonna have a reason to go back into Halo Infinite single player. That sucks,
because it's like, you only feel kind of like the missed potential, because to me, that campaign, the story was like, when you watch a TV show where that had like and not only that, it's like, imagine like a TV show that had a bad season finale, in this case like Halo 5, for example, then the season premiere has to clean stuff up before moving into the net. That's kind of how Halo Infinite felt to me. That was like, they were cleaning up Halo 5, but they didn't quite have like an own story, because they were setting it up for the future. And now, when is that future?
We don't get it.
It's like, and to me, it's like knowing that the Microsoft of all in that have been wanting to push like live service mentality in almost every game. Like recently, Forza Motorsports that came out, was it this week? Yeah, this week. That like the common consensus is like, this is a great foundation, but like the content's not there, because they're thinking of kind of like filling it up and all that. And it's like, that's always kind of like the sucky part of when I see someone trying to do a live service, because it feels like. Because sometimes people say, it's maybe because development is hard and all that, but it's like, it's very hard to see like an already established franchise moving to live service and provide less content like from the get-go. And how much of that is because it really was like hard to getting this together, or just like the mentality of just trying to like sparse what would have been the content at the beginning to try to like give it like piecemeal over time. And some people really taking advantage of that in a bad way. Like Battlefield 5 back in the day was a perfect example of me being like, wait, this is like really bare bones for Battlefield. What happened? No, it's like, no, it's going to be a live service this time. We're going to fill up like the campaign mission we were missing, the Battle Royale, and some other modes. And I'm like, what's your excuse? Like, why? Like, it feels like live service, like it's such a nuanced thing that allows games to become better like over time. And I hate using the word laziness, but it also feels like some developers use it as a crutch to launch a more bare bones product without like there's certainly no justification.
There's certainly some like people using the term live service to basically get their game out in an unacceptably unfinished state and give them less than they pay for. And there's also like a matter of like, a lot of live service games are free or really cheap, and that's because they know that they're not giving you a completed game, and they're hoping you'll stick with them and play the game, and then they'll be able to finish it. I think that's more okay. But like if you're a major AAA studio with a crazy budget and you're putting out a ridiculously unpolished game and then promising that you're going to fix it later. Like clearly the market is speaking pretty hard towards those people because those games have not done well, and I'm happy for it because that I think is a perversion of the live service model that I do not like. So.
Yeah, they're using the few success stories that put the hard work to fix their games as like, no, then we can do that. And I feel like it's like taking the long rest.
Should never be the plan.
Exactly.
Your plan should never be we're going to be Cyberpunk 2077.
No, never.
Yeah. We're going to go through that whole story. We're going to be No Man's Sky. We're going to release and everybody's going to be pissed and then we'll fix it. That's the model. No, it's not.
It does make me wonder if eventually we're going to see the gaming industry try to move beyond this terminology to try to kind of like clean out like the back stigma. Maybe. So because I really want to see it because eventually like I remember how I saw Destiny at the beginning, not a live service, but an MMO. That's kind of like how I like pictured it. People felt of MMOs as kind of like a dirty word, and they try to like do MMOs without calling them MMOs for a while. Now it's just the live service terminology, and I wonder if we're gonna move beyond that to see it because they're like I do agree with you, and that I do love how live service has helped some games and like fulfill the potential of something that's not there. I hate how some people take bad advantage of what it allegedly does, and it's like giving less complete products, and that's why like I'm wondering if especially right now when we know like for example Sony that they say they want to release many live services. I don't believe it now that Jimbo Ryan is out and hearing their cancel Last of Us game the freaking factions game that which by the way like because you had that conversation at I think it was in the last Bitcast about how that was like a bad idea. To me, it was like a bad idea as a live service because I did enjoy the factions multiplayer back in the original one, but that was not a live service. It was a mode. It was a singular mode that worked for them.
I think it was a bad mode.
I enjoyed it.
I think it was bad. I don't know why they were working on that. It's like the most talented studio ever, and you're going to put them on that? Why?
Yeah. I think it's like what's interesting about that is that whatchamacallit, a lot of people enjoyed it more than they thought they would because that was like even going into Last of Us, it was going to be like no one knew about that multiplayer and people enjoyed it more, and I think that's why they got that idea. But I'm kind of glad that it's like if it's gonna get killed in the crib, they're gonna kill it. so I'm like I wonder like if any new people that get into live service are gonna actually learn the lessons, or they're just gonna let the people that are currently successful like just be that, especially when games can be a lot of things. But yeah, I do agree. Live services are not gonna. You said it aren't going away. They're not, but I feel like it doesn't feel like more are gonna be joining. So and with that, Travis, like yeah, that's all that I had for you. So before I wrap us up, I usually end the show by reading the game releases for the next week. So this is for the game releases for the week of October 15th to October 21st. So. On October 16, we got the PS5 and Xbox Series X version of SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake, which you reviewed. That was your first review this year. You started it with a banger.
Not a good one.
A mediocre one. And then on October 17, we got Cyber Knight's Flashpoint that comes to PC, Macs, Linux, iOS, and Android. Mortal Kombat Onslaught on iOS and Android. Skull Island Rise of Kong. That sounds like a game that you review.
That game is made by the same people that made Nerf Legends. And most recently,
Avatar?
The Avatar Airbender game, both which got very bad scores. So, and by the way, they're not doing advanced copies on that game as well, which they didn't. They also did with Avatar. So just so you know, don't buy that game. I would wait for reviews on that one personally.
I'm sure. By the way, I'm shocked that one. You didn't review that one. That Avatar. It felt like
I almost did. I almost did. Tom came back from paternity leave to rescue me, but I almost reviewed that one. Yeah.
He wanted to take one for you.
He helped me out big time. Yeah. He did try to put me on Skull Island though, by the way. And I was like,
you whistled your way out.
Must we review it, Tom? Must we?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then that same day, Sonic Superstars comes to literally everything. Wizard with a Gun comes also to PS5, Series X, and PC. Mike Mignola's Hellboy Web of Weird comes to everything on October 18. Slender the Arrival comes to PS5 and Xbox Series X also on the 18. Endless Dungeon comes to everything on the 19. Galactic Civilizations 4 Supernova comes to PC also on the 19. Gangs of Sherwood comes to PS5, Xbox Series X and S and PC on the 19th. Gargoyles Remastered comes to Series X, PS4, Switch, and PC. I'm actually interested in that one. I remember playing, I think this is the Gargoyles game from the SNES, remastered. So, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2 Turbocharge comes to everything on October 19th. Overpass 2 comes to PS5, Series X, and PC on the 19th. The 7th gets VR also that same day on PSVR 2, Quest, and PC. The Gap also on October 19th for PS5, Series X, and PC. The Jackbox Party Pack 10 comes to everything also on October 19th. World of Horror on PS5, PS4, Switch, and PC on the 19th. And then the duology of October 20, Marvel Spider-Man 2 for PS5 and Super Mario Bros. Wonder on the Switch. So, you're not reviewing any of these games, right?
I think so.
Yeah, you get to like say that's a lot of games for next week, and a lot of also shovel. Like it feels like a lot of kind of like let's dump it here. So, yeah, to me, I'm interested to hear about Spider-Man, which I know the reviews are out on Monday, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, they haven't announced who's reviewing that one, right? At IGN.
No, I know who is reviewing it,
Yeah.
but yeah, they haven't announced it, I don't think. And then yeah, a few of those I think we considered reviewing, but there just wasn't enough interest. Like Wizard with the Gun, I think we're skipping on that one. And I was offered to review some of those, but I think we went with the Moria game because it just seemed like more people cared about it. So
yeah, I'm interested to hear about Sonic Superstars because I did enjoy
that one.
Yeah,
that one we are reviewing. I almost reviewed that too, but we gave it to somebody else. So
yeah, because you reviewed Sonic Sonic Frontiers last year. It's still my biggest surprise. That was my biggest surprise of 2022. Yeah,
surprisingly good. Yeah.
Have you tried that DLC?
I've not.
Oh my!
I've not gone back to that one at all, but I hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you like hard stuff, I tell you, it's like people are like, it's hilarity seeing like the Sonic fan base try to beat that DLC because people are asking who hurt Sonic Team to make this so like horrendously hard because the other game was like, yeah, the normal game was like pretty easy in comparison. So yeah, Travis, I want to thank you so much for joining me. It was an honor being able to like talk IGN with you. It's someone that, especially like I mentioned, I consider like you're like, I consider you what I consider Greg and Colin back then, like a mainstay of that side. Like you're in the same spot as like Ryan McCaffrey, the Damon Hatfield's, like those big names that stand up as like you are IGN blood, and I was glad to be able to look pro to you and
awesome.
Getting you into the podcast, hearing more about the story, your opinions, and hopefully sometimes in the future. See if I can get you back in, or if I get a review, also that I get to like tag team with you again, and maybe not the next payday.
We'll have to do it again soon, 100%. Yeah.
Or another co-op where I run into throw a grenade by accident because of the stupid control.
That was hella funny.
Yeah, it was.
Ains messaged me. He was like, "Hey, dude, he said that you called him a moron or something." I was like, "Oh, I was just we were just playing, funny, bro."
Yeah, no, that's what's so funny. Like, I also say I did it with like the smile face. Like, I said it in jest because I know it was a joke, and it's so funny. Paul said that he was glad that it was me that was the one that messed up and not him because he's more sensitive. So hopefully one day we can get you in, and he's also here and you can meet him. But yeah, Travis. Let's do it. Travis, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at TieGuyTravis, or you can read all of the stuff I write on IGN.com or on IGN's YouTube channel. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, you can find me at @A_Dorsegovia on Twitter /X. You can find me on Threads and /Instagram at Alejandro Segovia 93. And my current written content /reviews at seasongaming.com and some of my old stuff on my own website, thecriticalcorner.com. So, Travis, thank you so much, and our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know what you think. Go follow Travis. Go read all his reviews because he's done a lot. I tell you, he's done 76 reviews for IGN in 5 years, which is nuts. So
not bad.
Very prolific. So and with that brings a conclusion to the show. Everyone, thank you so much. Go play some of the million games that are here. Touch grass. Enjoy the rest of the fall, and press X to play. Peace out.